Hello and welcome to another Magic Duels gameplay. Today we're taking a look at a Grixis colored burn deck, so that means we're blue, black and red. And a burn deck is pretty simple. You usually play a few creatures to deal the early points of damage. In this case those are Thermo-Alchemist and Stormchaser Mage. And then we have a whole bunch of burn spells that can deal direct damage to the opponent. And we also have a small madness sub-theme with Fiery Temper, Alms of the Vein, and even Avacyn's Judgement that we can discard for value 2 cards like Cathartic Reunion. That also helps us find more burn spells to finish off the opponent. So let's take a look at the entire deck, starting out with Lightning Axe, which is a great madness enabler, because in order to cast the Lightning Axe we have to discard a card as an additional cost or pay 5 generic mana, but most of the time we will be discarding a card, so that means we can cast a card with madness that we just discarded, which usually means we get a discount and we're not down on card advantage, because we basically just cast the card that we discarded. And then Lightning Axe gets to deal 5 damage to a creature at instant speed for just a single red mana, so a pretty great card in this deck, and especially once we have a Thermo-Alchemist or a Stormchaser Mage in play, being able to Lightning Axe and Madness something means we're casting 2 instants or sorceries, which both trigger the Thermo-Alchemist and the Stormchaser Mage, as we will see in just a second. We also have 2 copies of Shock, just additional burn, can go directly to the opponent or can also deal with smaller creatures. Then we also have Jace, Vryn's Prodigy, which is one of our few blue cards in the deck, but is very powerful with Madness cards, since we can discard them to Jace's ability, draw cards, and then transform into Jace Telepath Unbound, which can cast even more burn spells from our graveyard. So just an excellent card, but usually gets met with a removal spell right away. Then we have some more creatures here. These are meant to deal damage to the opponent. We've got Thermo-Alchemist, which is an 0/3 that can also save us some damage by blocking some ground creatures. It's a defender, so it's not gonna attack anytime soon. And then we can tap it to deal 1 damage to each opponent, and whenever we cast an instant or sorcery we get to untap the Thermo-Alchemist. So basically for every instant or sorcery we cast, we can basically add 1 damage to that spell. And of course this is great when we start casting cards with Madness, because that's basically casting multiple cheap cards in the same turn, which all will untap the Thermo-Alchemist. And the same applies for Stormchaser Mage, which is a 1/3 flying haste with prowess, so for every non-creature spell we cast, the Stormchaser Mage will get +1/+1 until end of turn. Small difference between prowess and the Thermo-Alchemist ability. If we cast an enchantment, that will trigger prowess, but that will not untap Thermo-Alchemist. And we do of course have 2 very important enchantments in the deck that we will get to in a second. We also have 1 copy of Twin Bolt, which can deal 2 damage at instant speed divided as we choose among 1 or 2 target creatures and or players, so pretty versatile removal/burn spell. And very similarly we also have Avacyn's Judgement, which is just a sorcery speed version of Twin Bolt, but it also has Madness, and when we do get to Madness this, we can pay X and then deal X damage divided as we choose. So usually is only gonna come up in a late game once we have a lot of mana available, but still having that extra value with Madness is pretty nice. Then we also have Cathartic Reunion, which is kind of the glue that holds the deck together, because not only is it a Madness enabler, since we have to discard 2 cards in order to cast a Cathartic Reunion, it also draws 3 cards, so we can also get rid of excess lands that we don't need anymore in the late game and draw us into more burn spells. But of course the dream scenario with Cathartic Reunion is where we have 4 mana available, we cast a Cathartic Reunion discarding 2 Madness cards, and then we cast both of the Madness cards with their Madness ability, and we still get to draw 3 cards, so we basically got to cast 2 cards with Madness, which usually reduces their cost, and we also got to draw 3 cards, so that's of course the ideal scenario. Then we get to Fevered Visions, which is the enchantment I was talking about. A great card in a burn deck, since at the beginning of each player's end step, that player draws a card, but if that player is the opponent and they have 4 or more cards in their hand, Fevered Visions will deal 2 damage to that player. We also have Hungry Flames, which is a great addition from Aether Revolt, dealing 3 damage to target creature and 2 damage to target player. Very important the way it's worded. It says target creature and target player. So even if the opponent somehow gets rid of their own creature in response of Hungry Flames, we will still be dealing 2 damage to the player, because it mentions player separately as a separate target. So the opponent will not be able to fizzle the Hungry Flames like they could, for example, with Unlicensed Disintegration, because that only has 1 target, while Hungry Flames has 2 targets. So subtle difference, but it can certainly come up. Then of course we have Fiery Temper, a great Madness card in this deck, still fine by itself with 3 mana, but of course if we can Madness this for value, it's a lot better, and also only costs us single red mana. Can go to creatures or players. And the reason we're playing black is just for the single card, Alms of the Vein, which for 2 and a black drains 3 life basically, so we make our opponent lose 3 life and we gain 3 life, but also has Madness for just a single black, so very similar to the Fiery Temper in that regard. And then finally some more burn spells. We've got Exquisite Firecraft, which can deal 4 damage to a creature or player, and with Spell Mastery it's uncounterable. And then finally Collective Defiance, which is an escalate card, so if we pay extra generic mana, we can choose multiple modes, which are 4 damage to target creature, 3 damage to target opponent, and also target player discards all the cards in their hand and draws that many cards. So we can basically use all the modes in this deck. Damage to creatures, damage to players is pretty obvious, but we can also use the first mode on ourselves. If we have Madness cards in hand, for example, we can make ourselves discard those Madness cards and then still cast them if we have enough mana. So there's some tricky things you can do with Collective Defiance in this deck. And then our mana base, which isn't very pretty since we are basically a mono red deck trying to splash some blue and some black cards, but we've got 2 islands, 1 swamp, then 6 mountains, 2 Wandering Fumarole, which can also maybe get in for some damage if the opponent doesn't have any blockers, 2 Smoldering Marsh. Then we decided to go with a split of 1 Sunken Hollow and 1 Drowned Catacomb. Then 2 Sulfur Falls, 2 Dragonskull Summits, and 4 Evolving Wilds, which help us fix our mana in a 3-color deck. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which actually looks quite good here. I think we will be fetching an island with Evolving Wilds, which means we might not cast the Alms of the Vein anytime soon, but we still have 2 of our creatures, which are very important to have in your opener, and we have some burn spells to go with them, so should be fine. Hopefully our opponent doesn't have 2 removal spells, because it is important to get these creatures online, and they do deal most of the damage usually. Alright, so let's go ahead and just get an island here. And I usually do prefer leading with Stormchaser Mage unless I need the Alchemist to block for a turn. So opponent on red-green into Voltaic Brawler. Alright. That can hit pretty hard, but we do have lots of ways to deal with it. Shock, for example, is a pretty nice answer to it. Still didn't find any more lands here, but I think we are playing the Stormchaser Mage here. And I think we are attacking, since we're not blocking the Voltaic Brawler, so might as well attack. And then next turn we'll have to evaluate what we want to do. Would be nice if we drew another red source, so we could go Alchemist plus play a Shock, for example. So it looks like our opponent might be on an energy deck. And there they have a Harness Lightning taking care of our Stormchaser Mage. And they did leave up black mana, so they could easily have something like a Fatal Push, since they appear to be in Jund colors. And they do decide to pump up the Brawler, giving it +1/+1 and trample. And we did not find third land, so I think here it's either Avacyn's Judgement dealing 2 damage to the Brawler, or we just cast a shock. I don't think I like running out the Alchemist when our opponent could have Fatal Push to just kill the Alchemist and then use their mana this turn basically. And I think it might be better to use the Avacyn's Judgement here, since that's the most mana efficient play, since we are kind of constrained on mana. So yeah, let's Avacyn's Judgement and hope our opponent doesn't have a pump spell to save the Brawler. Alright, that works. So we're in a decent spot, I would say. Would be nice to find some more lands, but the opponent doesn't have any pressure in play. We've got a lot of burn in hand, as we see a Winding Constrictor, which is probably a creature we should respect, since it's the kind of card that can run away with the game. But we did not find a third land, so if we really want to get rid of the Constrictor, we could Lightning Axe, but we can't actually Madness anything for value. So now might be a good spot to just play out the Thermo-Alchemist, and that can actually also block the Winding Constrictor. Opponent did not leave a black mana since they needed it for the Constrictor. So the worst case scenario, our opponent next turn plays something with +1/+1 counter synergy, and then we have to deal with the Constrictor next turn. But yeah, I think I don't mind playing out the Alchemist here. And if they do have the Fatal Push, that's still fine. That just gives us more time to find another red source, so we can maybe Lightning Axe and Madness out a Fiery Temper. Instead it's just another Harness Lightning, that's also fine. The opponent does get an extra energy thanks to the Winding Constrictor. So they did get a little bit of value at least. Can we find a land? We can. It's a Sulfur Falls, so no black mana yet, but now we can, for example, just Hungry Flames the Winding Constrictor. Might be the safest play. We could take another hit from the Constrictor, hope they play another creature, and then maybe Lightning Axe plus Fiery Temper, but I think just casting the Hungry Flames here is the way to go. So 3 damage to Constrictor, 2 damage to our opponent. And now we can basically cast all our spells except for the Alms. And there we see a Glintsleeve Siphoner, which does cost the opponent 1 life if they want to draw extra cards, but I think it's probably still worth killing the Siphoner here if we can. Although Fevered Visions is a nice one. Don't have enough mana to escalate the Defiance, otherwise it would be tempting to just kill the Siphoner and deal some damage to the opponent. Could Lightning Axe the Siphoner and then Madness out the Fiery Temper, or we can just run out the Fevered Visions, of course, which would also help us find land drops, but would give our opponent 1 turn to draw an extra card with the Siphoner. But then again, that does kind of play into our Fevered Visions as well, since the opponent is more likely to have a full hand. I think I like getting the Fevered Visions going. Could get punished if the opponent has a Reclamation Sage, but I think the Jund Energy deck has enough quality 3-drops that they don't really play Reclamation Sage that often. Find another Thermo-Alchemist. So does the opponent opt to draw an extra card? They do. Land number 4. And an Aether Sphere Harvester, which is also a reason why I didn't want to Lightning Axe the Siphoner, since this has 5 toughness and can gain the opponent a bunch of life, which is not what we want. So Siphoner gets in there, we lose 2, the opponent gets another energy. Opponent draws a card, loses 2 because they have 4 cards in hand. Alright, we found a land, that's perfect. So now we have a bunch more options available. I think I like using the shock to get rid of the Siphoner, since while I don't mind my opponent drawing extra cards because we have Fevered Visions in play, it's probably still better to prevent it and get rid of our opponent's only creature. Then when the opponent goes to play a creature to crew the Harvester, we can Lightning Axe the Harvester and madness out either the Fiery Temper or the Alms. Could also just play the Thermo-Alchemist. Let our opponent draw an extra card with the Siphoner, which will also cost them 1 life. And then we can still Lightning Axe plus maybe Alms. But I think this game, since we have a Fevered Visions going, we might not need to get more damage in with creatures. We might just win with Burn, since we have a lot of it in hand. So yeah, let's just shock the Siphoner here, and then keep up Lightning Axe plus Madness card, and go from there. Another Thermo-Alchemist, so maybe next turn we can just deploy 2 of them. Smuggler's Copter, that's fine. Does our opponent have a creature to crew their Harvester? They do not. So I think actually end of turn I just wanna Fiery Temper the opponent here, so we don't waste our mana. And then we still have the option of Lightning Axe plus Alms. As we find another Alms. Yeah, now might be a fine time to play a Thermo-Alchemist. It's probably gonna get killed by a removal spell, but that's still fine. The other option would just be to hardcast an Alms of the Vein, and then just Lightning Axe discarding Thermo-Alchemist on the Harvester, which is also fine. Our opponent is very likely to have removal for it just because they didn't play a creature, and what other cards could they have in hand? Yeah, actually I don't hate it. Let's just make our opponent lose 3 life. And this way we just have to Lightning Axe the Harvester, and then we should be able to win next turn, since they will likely lose 2 more life to the Fevered Visions. So what we don't want to see is a pump spell on the Harvester to save it from the Lightning Axe. Would also gain the opponent a bunch more life. We see a Verger's Gearhulk, that's fine. They can't crew their vehicle in response, so they do have to put all the counters on the Gearhulk itself. We could have killed the Gearhulk in response, but of course we want to kill the Harvester. We want to wait for the opponent to attack with it. We could make them spend the energy to give it lifelink, since they're probably going to anyways, and then we can Lightning Axe, discarding a Thermo-Alchemist. Now the opponent does have an 8/8 creature in play, but the opponent is going to take 2 from the Fevered Visions here, and then we can just Exquisite Firecraft them for the last 4 points. And yeah, I'm just gonna do this. It's the easiest way. And there we go. On to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which is pretty good here. We've got a bunch of 2 mana creatures and the lands to cast them, plus some burn spells on top. So let's see what the opponent is up to. Hissing Quagmire, so could be a black-green mid-rangey deck. And here, let's just run out the Stormchaser Mage and hit for 1. And then next turn we can go Fumarole plus Alchemist. Opponent casting an Elvish Visionary, alright. So Twin Bolt is a pretty nice way of dealing with it, and still dealing 1 to the opponent as well. But for now I think I'm happy just casting the Alchemist and getting that in play first. The opponent might also play another 1 toughness creature we can get with Twin Bolt. 3 Thermo-Alchemists is a bit much. We would prefer to draw a few more burn spells here. But maybe if the opponent has a lot of removal, then this is fine. Now of course we can also just block the Elvish Visionary, so we don't bleed life. Instead, no attacks. Opponent might have removal for the Stormchaser Mage here, but that's fine. Evolving Wilds is either gonna get another mountain or just a swamp for our Alms in case we draw one. So I think we just attack for 1 and play another Thermo-Alchemist. could be playing into a potential sweeper from the opponent, which they could easily have, so might be a reason to instead hold on to our removal spells here. Could be a green-black sacrifice deck, but if it's more of a mid-range control deck, they could easily have either Yahanni's Expertise or Languish, in which case playing out the other Thermo-Alchemist would be pretty bad. I guess if we attack and our opponent has spot removal for the Stormchaser Mage, then we know it's pretty safe to play out another Thermo-Alchemist. Instead, the opponent just takes one. Yeah, I think I'm gonna play it slow here. I don't think I want to play out the other Thermo-Alchemist. And then next turn, depending what our opponent does, we can maybe have a better idea what we should do. We see a Tireless Tracker, alright, so that's fine. And then Evolving Wild, so alright, maybe could have played out the other Thermo-Alchemists. Opponent fetches in response, so now we can ping with the Thermo-Alchemist, and I think we just Hungry Flames here rather than Twin Bolts. Untap our Thermo-Alchemist and do it once again. So next turn we can play a Thermo-Alchemist and Twin Bolt if we want to, or we can hang on to the Twin Bolt so we can untap multiple Thermo-Alchemists. And I think we get the Swamp here. Opponent does get to attack, so yeah, maybe shouldn't have tapped the Thermo-Alchemist there, was a bit too hasty. But if we draw land now, it does open up an attack with the Fumarole, so there's that. See what we draw, another Hungry Flames. So here I actually don't hate running out the two other Thermo-Alchemists. Now that we saw the Tireless Tracker, it's less likely that our opponent also has Languish in their deck, since those usually don't really combine too well. And then I guess hope our opponents can't remove our creatures, because if they can't kill all these Thermo-Alchemists, I'm pretty sure they're just dead next turn to one of these burn spells. As we see Priest of the Bloodrite, alright, so that strongly indicates that our opponent was playing the green-black sacrifice kind of deck. And end of turn, don't have to forget to ping the opponent with the Thermo-Alchemist. So they do have a blocker with the Demon now. The opponent is also gonna lose some life to their own Priest. So let's see what happens if we just ping with all of the Alchemists, deal damage to Demon, attack with the Stormchaser Mage. So that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And they have to trade the Mage for the Demon token. That seems fine, and then next turn we kill them with Twin Bolt. Well, we might as well just tap the Alchemists now. And then attack with the Stormchaser Mage. We could actually... Well, we could Cathartic Reunion, but then we have to discard a Twin Bolt, so unless we find another cheap red card, we're not 100% sure we can win. So I think I like attacking with the Stormchaser Mage. The opponent's gonna block with the 5/5 Demon here, is my guess. And then we can Hungry Flames, and that combined with the Prowess trigger will be enough to take out the Demon, and then deal 2 to the opponent as well, untap all our Thermo-Alchemists. Opponent will also take 2 from their Priest on the upkeep. So opponent's at basically 1 life here. And we can say go. And I'm not sure if the opponent has anything they can draw to get out of this. Kalitas is a life-linking creature, but they're not gonna be able to gain any life off of it. It of the Horrid Swarm, alright, that's not bad. They can get rid of their own Priest of the Bloodrite, get 2 insect tokens for their troubles, but I don't think this is gonna be good enough. Oath of Nissa from the opponent. What's it gonna get? Another It of the Horrid Swarm, that's fine. And then end of turn, ping with our alchemists. And then Twin Bolt is gonna finish the job. Or I guess we can do it in style. Discard Fiery Temper. And so casting the Cathartic Reunion will trigger all of the Thermo-Alchemists. And then when we go to cast the Fiery Temper, that's going to trigger all the Alchemists once again. So normally we would have to tap the Alchemist here in response to the trigger, so we get to deal 1 more damage with them. But since the opponent is at 1 and we want to finish them off with the Fiery Temper, we're not going to do that. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which doesn't have any creature. It's a little heavy on the lands, so it's by no means a great hand. But I think it's probably borderline keepable. Since we do have all the mana we need, double red is important, we can get black with Evolving Wilds. So, of course, drawing more lands is the problem with this kind of hand. I think we do run out the Evolving Wilds here just to thin out our deck a bit. And I think we, at this point, might as well get a mountain since we now have black mana with Dragonskull Summit. As we see a Duskwatch Recruiter, which we certainly want to answer here. So let's get another mountain. And then just Twin Bolt that before it transforms. Alright, Cathartic Reunion is a nice draw. That means we can maybe get rid of some lands and madness out the Fiery Temper next turn if we want to. We could go Island and then leave up Dragonskull Summit. Alright, so no play from the opponent. Alright, so I think we do just Reunion here. Discarding Fiery Temper and a mountain. And then deal 3 to the opponent, which is quite aggressive here, but hopefully the Reunion can find us more burn spells, and there we go, perfect. So next turn we get to go Island Stormchaser Mage, and if our opponent has a creature in play we can even Lightning Axe plus Alms. Instead they have Explosive Vegetation, so we don't quite get to go off, but still getting that Stormchaser Mage is pretty good. So I think we Stormchaser Mage plus cast Avacyn's Judgement just to enable prowess. We could wait and Lightning Axe discarding Avacyn's Judgement, just so we can also deal extra damage with the Madness on the Judgement. But we also still have this Firecraft, so I think we will have the tools to deal enough damage to the opponent. Just need to make sure we can cast all these burn spells in time before the opponent does anything too scary. So yeah, I don't mind casting the Judgement here for 2 and then hitting our opponent for 2 with the Stormchaser Mage. Opponents might be casting something like a Thought-Knot Seer, since they did get a Wastes, so they could have some of those colorless Eldrazi. And if they have a Thought-Knot Seer, we still have either Firecraft or Lightning Axe to answer it. Instead it's Gaia's Revenge, which is gonna hit us pretty hard. And we can't target it with the Lightning Axe, unfortunately. So we will somehow have to try and raise the Gaia's Revenge, which is not an easy task. Cathartic Reunion, however, does help. So for sure we can discard the Alms here and cast it with Madness. Then the question is, do we want to discard the Lightning Axe or the Mountain? I think we actually discard the Lightning Axe here, since it's unlikely that it's gonna matter. Plus we still have the Firecraft. So let's Cathartic Reunion. Discarding Alms plus Lightning Axe. Cast the Alms of the Vein. Target our opponent. And now I think I do play the Alchemist rather than another Cathartic Reunion, just to have a blocker in case our opponent plays another Gaia's Revenge or maybe a Reality Smasher. Then I might be tempted to chum block. And then we can get more damage in next turn. While casting the Reunion now would just be dealing one more with Prowess. Alright, so if our opponent has a good play on their turn, we could be dead. But if they just play another big creature that doesn't do much, then we should be able to finish off our opponent with Firecraft and the creatures we have in play. Rishkar's Expertise is the card we did not want to see from the opponent, so they get to draw 8 cards. And now they get to Monstrous Onslaught, dealing 8 damage to our creatures, so they get rid of all our creatures. And they still have a full hand after that Rishkar's Expertise, so still have a Firecraft. And our opponent's at 7, so if we can draw another 3 damage burn spell, we do just win. Opponent has to discard 2 hand size, so we do have a lot of live draws here. And it's a Smoldering Marsh, which means if we play the Firecraft, we're just dead to the Gaia's Revenge, so we do need to find something with the Cathartic Reunion here. So I think I'll tap Mountain and Island and then just discard 2 lands. And then if we can find something like an Alms of the Vein, we can maybe stay alive for a turn. A creature can potentially chum block and buy us a turn. Alright, there's the Alms of the Vein, as well as a Stormchaser Mage. So, given that our opponent showed us Monstrous Onslaught, they could have more of those kind of removal spells. So playing the Stormchaser Mage to chum block doesn't seem as good as just playing the Alms of the Vein. And we'll go up to 10, opponent has 9 power. They could easily have another haste creature or pump spell, but this does put us in the position of just winning next turn with the Firecraft if our opponent doesn't have anything. So I think we just go for it. And I think we also play out the Fumarole here. Alright, so opponent has to show us a hasty creature, a pump spell, or a way to gain life, I guess. I thought not Seer taking the Firecraft would also work. So they do have a lot of outs, but they are rather specific. Another Rishkar's Expertise will probably find our opponent what they need. Could get maybe a Reality Smasher that they can cast for free. Instead it's a Seer's Lantern. Alright, alright, Primal Bellow, that's gonna do it. So opponent pumps the Gaia's Revenge for each forest they control, which is 8 apparently, and they get to hit us for 16. So pretty close game, but yeah, let's move on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which looks quite good. We can cast our Thermo-Alchemists, plus we have Cathartic Reunion to go with the Fiery Temper. But now we see a Greenbelt Rampager, which is a 3/4, which we don't have a great answer to since most of our burn spells only deal 3 damage. That being said, still not too worried about the Rampager since it will take some time before the opponent can actually resolve it. If they go Forest next turn, I guess they can cast it 2 more times and make sure it stays in play. And they do have the untapped Forest, so they could actually go for that if they want to. Unless they have another card they want to play instead. Alright, so opponent will get to stick this Greenbelt Rampager, which is not bad. 3/4, that's pretty hard to deal with from our side. I guess we can always draw a Lightning Axe. And Exquisite Firecraft is also not a bad answer. Play out the Alchemists. Opponent on only forests so far. I'm interested to see if they're playing a second or even a third color. They're gonna hit us for 3, that's fine. Certainly not blocking. And a Scrapheap Scrounger. I don't think this is a situation where we just want to use all the burn spells on our opponent, since we are taking 6 damage every turn. So I actually don't mind playing out the Thermo-Alchemist, playing out the Mountain, and then using Shock to take care of the Scrap Heap Scrounger. Basically prevents as much damage as killing the Greenbelt Rampager, but this is a lot more mana efficient. So let's ping the opponent and shock the Scrap Heap right away to play around any pump spells the opponent could have. And say go. And the opponent does appear to be stuck on 2 mana, so that's gonna work out well for us. So next turn we have the option of Cathartic Reunion, discarding Fiery Temper plus whatever card we draw. Couldn't really play out the Smoldering Marsh since that would come into play tapped, but we do want access to black mana at some point in case we draw those Alms of the Vein. Smuggler's Copter, alright. End of turn, ping the opponent. So, given that the opponent's stuck on mana, they couldn't really deploy their hand very well. I think this is a good spot to just start burning our opponent right away, rather than taking out the creatures. Since we are at 14, we might just take 6 damage next turn, but I think we can outrace that. So the question here is, do we Reunion plus Fiery Temper, or do we just Exquisite Firecraft? I think I like Reunion plus Fiery Temper, because with the Alchemist in play, that's 2 triggers to untap them, and the opponent might be missing a color that maybe is black since they are playing Scrap Heap, and if they find removal for the Alchemists, then getting those 2 untapped triggers right now is more important. So I think we play out the Smoldering Marsh and then tap our Alchemists so we don't mess up, and then Reunion, discarding Fiery Temper and Evolving Wilds, and then it doesn't really matter what land we tap here. With the Fiery Temper, I guess we might as well tap the Fumarole to represent Fatal Push with our black mana. And in response here, make sure to tap our Alchemists again, so they will untap when we cast the Fiery Temper. So the opponent falls to 11, and they're basically at 9, and we drew into a Lightning Axe. Alright, that's good. So I think we just say go. Another Scrap Heap Scrounger from the opponent. And I think it's probably fine to take out the Copter with the Lightning Axe. So let's see, if we ping to 9, then to 7, and that's another, yeah, so we should be able to just win here. And it doesn't really matter what we discard. I guess we discard the Cathartic Reunion since we're gonna be empty-handed soon. Untap our Thermo-Alchemists. Take out the Copter. Opponent can still attack us for 3 if they want to. Now, even if we find another blue land, we could even attack with the Fumarole if we wanted to. So end of turn, tap our Alchemists. And then next turn, Firecraft should be enough since we get to untap our Alchemists again. And we even found a blue land. So we get to basically do it all here. Play out the Stormchaser Mage. Ping with Thermo-Alchemists. Play out the Firecraft, put our opponent at 1. And then we have 6 more damage in store. Trigger Prowess, and we could attack here, but let's put the opponent out of their misery and ping them with the Alchemist. Alright, sweet. I want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this gameplay. And as always, have a nice day.